and a signing board next to the bar in the back. You can sign. If we run out of room on the front, you can certainly sign in the back and write her a nice note if you would. We'd really appreciate that. Laurette has been a member since the 70s, when initially there were only 28 members. She's always been a bright light and a mentor to all the new people. She's a great Irish-American woman that we cherish and love. I was going around the room. I know there's three goddesses. There's one for grace. I thought it was virtue, and then the third one escapes us. But certainly, Laurette is grace. Now, I know the other women are wondering, and so are you, who in the club would be virtue, but I'll let you figure that out as the night goes on. But I know elegance and grace is all the adjectives that come to mind whenever you think of Laurette McNiel. She has carried us through the club in many, many ways that shows of support, and certainly with the behind-the-scenes networking that she does. And she's a great letter writer, and has taught us all a lot about etiquette and grace in a very nice manner. I would like to introduce her son, Ken McNiel, who will speak about our honoree. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Thank you, Jean. Thank you to the Women of Irish Heritage for honoring my mom this afternoon as Woman of the Year. And very kind of you. And if I could just indulge your patience for a couple minutes, I'll like to say a few words in her introduction. This occasion gave me pause to think about the women of Irish heritage who helped to raise me. Certainly my mother, Laurette Connors, and we have some Connors here today from her father's family coming all the way down from Vermont. We much appreciate that. And certainly my grandmother, Laura Foote. And we have Foots here today from, let me think, Cincinnati and Virginia and Brooklyn, where my grandmother was from. Yay! All right, Brooklyn, baby. And New Rochelle, so the Foots are well. We have so many Foots here, we actually have feet. Not the first time they've heard that. And certainly my Aunt Elizabeth, my mother's sister, and dearly missed for all of us. And I certainly wish you were here. And in her stead, I'm very glad that two of her daughters and two of her grandsons have flown in from Colorado for this occasion, left 18 inches of snow in Fort Collins, can you imagine? So thank you to all of them and all the friends and all of you who came here today to share this day with my mother. One of the things I remember from a long time ago, when I was about 5 years old, so we're talking about 1960 or so, when I was with the women of Irish heritage who raised me. There was a day, I don't remember which house we were, but perhaps my Aunt Elizabeth. And we were playing, my cousins were like sisters to me, and we were playing, and we had lost something that we had from the day before. We couldn't find it. And I don't know who started it, whether it was my mother or my Aunt Elizabeth or my grandmother, but one of them told me it must have been the little people who took it. And I was 5 years old, so little people, I thought, oh. I asked questions, I heard stories, I asked some more questions, I heard stories. I came to understand that there were these little people, so small, they're so little you can't even see them. And they come out at night sometimes, and they'll take your stuff. They're not evil, more capricious, more play tricks on you. They'll take your stuff and hide it on you. And sometimes they'll help you, though. They'll find, the socks you can't find. All of a sudden, there it is on the floor when you wake up. I became fascinated with little people. I believed in them for the longest time. And, of course, as I got older, at some point, I learned the difference between the story and the truth. But nonetheless, throughout my life, I've always had a fondness in my heart for the little people, figuratively and literally. Certainly, what I remembered most from those stories was the smile it would put on my face and all of our faces when we lost something or had something to find. It was really stories that had been carried down through my mother's family. As I think about introducing my mother today, as we come to the introduction, certainly I would be amiss if I didn't mention at least a couple of her accomplishments that some people probably don't know. At 14 years old, she was the state champion for the female backstroke in the state. Great swimmer, my mom. As part of that, she actually got to race Johnny Weissmuller once, and many of you would not maybe know him, but he was, I believe, the first Tarzan. If not, he was one of the, maybe the second of the call. And he was Olympic champion, and My mom got to race him. I don't have the details complete, maybe a 100-yard race, and he spotted her 25 yards, and she thought she could hold that lead, but she says that the last lap, she could hear him coming on, his shoulders churned the water like a steam engine, and he finally caught her right before the finish line. But certainly an honor. And she was also, her and her sister both were in the All-State Choir in West Orange, and in this All-State Choir coming from West Orange High School. Certainly one of the things I think I feel most proud is the love and care she gave to her youngest brother, Paul, my uncle, who was born cognitively impaired and lived a special needs person life. My mother gave a tremendous amount of her time herself, really, in his care throughout his life. Though I would say I'm probably most proud, though, of the little things she's done. Because if you know my mom, you know there's never a conversation she can't join. And there's never someone she's ever met that she couldn't walk up to and say hello and tell a story and where you been and how's your day and where are your people from. And without even knowing the details, I know that there's hundreds, perhaps thousands of people, Mom, that you've touched in the life, not necessarily as a big, important person, but as someone who came upon someone in the middle of the day, maybe at the deli counter, or mowing the lawn, or stuck at the airport, and struck up a conversation and had a smile. And I know that she left them with smiles because that's her nature. Because sometimes little people, that's what they do. They leave us with smiles. So as we celebrate my mother's award today, I hope you're all aware that when she joined this organization back in the beginning, my grandmother was living with us at the time, and so was my Uncle Paul, and my mother was very busy, and she'd heard about this. She was invited to join, and she was very excited, and she joined a lot of things. And between my father and her mother, they told her, well, yes, you can do this, you can join, but you've got to stay a regular member. You can't be running any committees or any president. Don't do that, because there's a lot of other things we have to have done. And true to her original commitment, that's what she's done. She's been a regular member of this organization for, I guess, more than 40 years. And sadly, I know the organization through my mom. I sadly have not been to enough of the events, but if it's like many organizations, I think a lot of times we celebrate our presidents, our past presidents, and that's well and good because they do the work, they deserve it. But today, in honoring my mom, we're honoring a regular member. So today, as we honor my mother as Woman of the Year, let's remember the little people in the world that sometimes give us a smile and leave us with something, perhaps a bit of hope, perhaps a brighter step as we go through our days. And sometimes little people can do great things, you know, even though it's not always recognized. Well, today we recognize it, and it's certainly my great pleasure and truly an honor to introduce my mother, Laurette Connors McNiel, as Woman of the Year. Again, the standing L, Mom. Check it out.
Thank you very much. Thank everybody for coming and all your nice words you have to say for me. In my life, my parents were what made me Irish, of course, but a lot of things that they told me about, and I'm really honoring them. My mother and father were both born in this country, two parents who were born in Ireland, with the one exception. So it was those people that my mother and father loved. They loved Irish people. They would be beside themselves if they were here. And so I'd like to talk about them. My father's father was John Connors, and these people came over before the potato famine because they were very mad about, so you've heard about Oliver Cromwell. Well, he did it to the two areas they came from, Clare and Tipperary. So John Connors' father had died of lung trouble, and so his mother, 5 years later, and Grandpa, who's John Connors, came over on a sailing ship. And the sailing ship handled her death at sea by having her buried at sea. So he came over by himself. And he landed in Castle Harbor in New York and was met by his cousins. And the cousins lived in in West Orange, now what we call Victoria Corner. Actually, where the church is, there were little houses at that time, and my aunt lived there, and they were related through grandparents. So she took care of them from 14 till 16. And a lot of people from Clare had heard about a railroad being built up in New England, around Vermont, and upper New York State, and they lived up there, and they got a hold of him by letter, and he asked him to come up. At 16, he could work. So he went up, and he started at the bottom. He was supposed to have had very blue, flashing eyes, and he had a way with people, and he just loved people. So he worked himself up. I think you start with a quarter for a week when you first start as a railroad man. Remember, these were days with no minimum wage, no laws of labor, and they had you while the amount of money they paid you. So this group of Irish people all loved gold. And at that time in this country, there was, instead of a dollar bill, a gold coin dollar. And all those Irishmen loved that. And when they got so they could earn $1, well, that's what they got. So my grandpa was able to keep going and doing well. And he met a girl who had also been born in Ireland, and they married at 19. And he was thought of it well enough that the railroad people gave him one of their houses, and that was a possibility in those days. And so they raised 9 children. And then they always wanted to love land. They also missed land. If you were in Ireland those days, I don't know about now, but the first boy gets the land, and the rest of you go for yourself. So, so they loved land, and there was a farm for sale, 550 acres in Vermont, which they bought, and it had a house, and it had farm buildings, a place for the horses, a place for the ice, and cedar lines so that the ice wouldn't melt, and they had a big barn for 32 cows, and a place for pigs, and a place for chickens, and a great big kind of a building that had it looked like a tub, but it was filled with cold water. And after the cows were milked, they would put in those big cans, you know about it, but it had to be set in cold water until Borden's trucks could come in and get it, and that was every morning. So Grandpa got these kids to realize that every one of them was going to get some land, and that was, to him, very important. And his dad was the next to youngest. His oldest brothers and sisters were grown up and working by the time he was ready for high school. They all went to a one-room school, but they were usually mostly Connors in that school. And so he got to know all the parts, that every question was asked. He had a good memory. And he wanted to go on to school afterwards, and there was no place to go there. So after 8th grade, everybody stopped. But his oldest brothers and sisters and mother got after Grandpa, and they made him help get this boy in school. So he had a bicycle. His older brothers and sisters went up to see the headmaster. It was one of the last black schools. And so he pedaled up there 14 miles, and he went to school. And at Thanksgiving, he came home, pedaling back, and said, I already passed Algebra 1. The headmaster was very nice. You know, we don't have that much money, and so I'm going to graduate early. So he kept doing this all through school, so he was able to go on at 18 after supposedly graduating from high school. Not with, he got the credits, but not the hours. So he began teaching in one-room school, then he was a supervisor, then he went down to his oldest brother's town, Waterbury, Connecticut. His oldest brother was very good at mechanics. There was a lot of clocks made down there, and he worked in the factory. And so my father got a job teaching in Ansonia, then he got a job in Connecticut, then he got a job teaching in Hoboken, New Jersey. He liked Hoboken because it was a mile square, and the principal, Mr. Brandt, had a teacher from every state in that school. So that was interesting for Hoboken kids to learn. And then Daddy went over to Columbia, but at Columbia, they wanted to know how many hours you had for all these courses in high school. So he had to do a little makeup as he studied for them, and he also taught in, for extra credit, in the New Jersey. It was a Newark Academy. Then, while he was in Columbia, he lived in New York, and his mother and sister said, find a nice Catholic home, and if possible, go live there. Don't be in with the boarders. They lived with Herb Walsh and his mother, who was a recent widow, and that was on 35th Street, and downtown in New York was 23rd Street. And so they went to Columbia, and Daddy met Herb, and Herb Walsh had a friend, Paul Foote. And so my father was invited to a Friday night party, which was down in Brooklyn, and that's where my father saw a nice girl working at the piano, and they got acquainted. That was my mother. Now, my mother was raised in Brooklyn. She was born in Brooklyn, raised in Brooklyn, but in her day, the parents wanted her to go on to high school. There were only a few girls went to high school. It was the only school in Brooklyn, and she went, graduated, and then she could go to summer school and then have a temporary teacher certificate. So that's what she did. She started teaching grammar school. She always gave her money, which was $500 a year, to her mother. And then she taught 7 years and married my father. The growing up years, she was taken to parties. You never went by yourself. The girl was very, very well treated. And so her older brother would take her and have a good time at the birthday parties for little girls. Or a cousin that she liked very much, named Marty Gorman. And they loved to have him take her because he was a lot of fun too, and he knew how to be responsible for a girl. So they all grew up being very dependent on each other, a boy and a girl, a man and a wife. And they came and moved to New Jersey, and now I go on to tell about the people in that little book that I put together of my grandmother and my grandfather on the foot side. So the heroine is my grandmother, because she was the first in our family born in this country. And my grandfather was the son of a Civil War veteran, and he joined the Civil War, which was allowed in those days, to get money. He wanted to get his family over here. And in those days, a person in New York could advertise he wanted somebody to go in his place in the Civil War, and he'd pay him $300. So my grandfather's father did that, and he was able to have the money to have his family sent over. And my grandfather was the oldest of the 5 children, and so his mother let him go up on deck, and the sailing ships, he loved the sea, and he thought that was great. And the younger brothers and sisters had to stay below. And so when they all got to New York, the mother knew her husband was in the war, and she rushed him right over from Castle Garden to the Catholic Church, and they prayed, and then they went on up to Connecticut, to Middletown, where a lot of Irish people lived, because there was a place, factory, that had a mill that worked with the Connecticut River. And so Grandma and Grandpa both went to school through 5th grade, and then Grandma was able to go to 6th grade because she had an aunt that sent $2. You had to have money to go to public school. In those days, there were no Catholic schools. So from 7th grade age on, she worked in the factory down below. Hard work. I don't know what she did, but she gave her money to her mother too. And then in her later years, when she noticed this John Foote on one side of the street and she was on the other, he'd just been up in Boston working in a jewelry store that Paul Revere had started. And the way he got the job was through the priest, because you had to have a character reference, and we always worked with a priest. And the priest gave a nice letter explaining that the father was a veteran, he was wounded, and his career in Ireland was he was a letterer. And in the art school that I taught in Newark, that was quite a profession. You've seen in the Catholic churches around the side, those little paintings, but they're gold in the middle and black on the outside. Letters, and that was his profession. And some people call him a painter, but that's what he did. And now my grandfather was walking down the other side of the street and coming back home, and he saw her. He thought she was the most beautiful girl in Middletown, which he always called her. And then they married, and it took 3 months to make her dress because there were whale bones sewed in, and she had all kinds of ruffles. Any kind of a stitch, they were proud to use it. That was important. All the girls sewed. Nobody could go buy clothes on a rack, and so every girl knew that. And even my aunt had great time with it, sewing, and always had a machine with some cloth on it. And the other thing that was interesting about that was the people in Ireland at that day would have a shoemaker who had a model of your shoe. And so when you went to get a pair of shoes, he took your model out and made the shoe. So my grandma's brother thought that's what he'd do, and he made boots. The matching outfit would have a boot that matched. That was his career. So down in Brooklyn, they lived together and had their 50th wedding anniversary. They married in 1883 and 1993, 50th wedding anniversary in the Bossard Hotel. The first time I ever was on a receiving line. And then the next year, Grandma died in November and he died in the spring. They were inseparable. To show you that, he loved to walk. He would walk one time from West Orange all the way to Newark to get the train. He wanted to just walk. He liked to walk all over the city, and he was very proud of Brooklyn Bridge, built by Irishmen. And when one Irishman would fall into the water, all the Irish and every worker would get off and not work that day. That's how they worked. But Grandpa was one of the first to walk across that bridge, and we heard about it all our lives. And so that's their story. And the funny thing to you would be that because it was the 17 and 1800s, some of the patterns what we used were ridiculous to you. For instance, somebody asked you to visit the house, and you must refuse 3 times, politely, and small talk, but the third time you say yes, and you go. And then the other one was that if you have a visitor come and like something in your house, and oh, I like that, I admire it, you must give it to them. And in return, when you go to that person's house, you find something you like, you're out of sync. So there's a bond long ago with people that was close. After all, there was no radio, no any way of talking like you do, cell phone and telephone. So it was a bond between people, and there was a closeness, I think, that way. And the one that was still used by some of my students at Westside, and we did at home, you use your fork to help cut the food, but then you take the fork for good etiquette and put it in your right hand, and you use your right hand. You do that? You do that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an old etiquette thing. And so those are those little stories. And to show you my mother, I'd like to explain something she did once for me, and it shows her. When my oldest cousin, I had 32 first cousins, so of course they all begot and were close. And the mother's side of the family got together Thanksgiving, Christmas, I knew it well. And then in summer we visited all around New England. And because the farmhouse had 9 bedrooms, it was always a good place to stay. And my sister and I would stay in the room with my father and his younger brother. And so I knew all those people well too. And the other thing I want to say about that was my mother was trying to explain to me one time my predicament. Jack, the oldest of the footmen in New York, in Brooklyn, was going into the Navy and from Annapolis. And then he was out on the West Coast, and he married a lovely girl, and she had been a nurse, and she was going to Catholic school, and taught at the Catholic hospital as well by getting her education on her own. And so she was a graduate of college. And she came and she lived with us for a while in Brooklyn, and as a relative came out to visit me. Oh, she was better than a big sister. I just loved her. And Jack was then sent to the Caribbean, and she could be living down there and see him for 1 week a month. And that was arranged. And we all went to watch him go off in the ocean liner. And, oh, I thought that was grand to have a life like that. And I said, oh, Mother, I wish I could grow up and travel like that. And I just wish I could. And Mother said, well, someday you'll have something God has in mind for you much better. And look what I got.
Yeah!
I had a student who was quite a fellow. And I had asked him before I spoke that if I talked too long, he should give me the signal, John Sweeney. I didn't look over that way.
Laurette, from all the women of Irish heritage, just this small token of our love and esteem for you. I hope you wear it in good health.
My grandsons are going to want me back.
Thank you. Well, the bar's still open, there'll be food, and there'll be dance, and I'm sure the little people are amongst us tonight.